Well, hello, world. We are live once again. This is Joe McCarthy at MoJOE Studio with my good friend John Y. Rao, as I like to call J-Dub. He's like my little brother of another mother out there in Michigan. Hey, looks great out there, John. How you doing today?
I am fantastic, my friend. It is overcast. If any of you here in Michigan know, it has been rainy and rainy and rainy every day, but life is good, man. I don't think I'm gonna get rained on. I might have to run inside though.
Well, that explains all of the greenery behind you. The rain makes it green.
Yeah, I won't show you my yard because it certainly needs some mowing.
Yeah, it wasn't too long ago. You were sitting in that same spot, and all the trees were bare, right? They had no leaves, and you're saying, "Spring is coming. I know it's coming soon." And boom, it has come.
Oh yeah, it has. It's full. It kind of ruins my view a bit. I normally have a better view, but it's you can't complain about a bunch of trees either, so it's all good.
Ruins my
Yeah,
view.
right. Ruins my view.
I'm feeling for you, John. Feeling for you.
Yeah.
Hey, hey, for our listeners, if you haven't tuned in before, John and I became friends through a mutual friend, Rick Olson, who is a great organizational consultant and a keynote speaker and coach, and just a wonderful brother. And he taught the two of us in a class last summer. I think it's over a year ago now, after COVID hit and put us all stuck inside. We joined online a class about how to be a better speaker, how to do that more professionally, and learned a ton in the class, but also became good friends along the way. And although we have never met, we have we have become good buddies online, and we touch base regularly, multiple times a week. And as John said, it's like he's my best friend, and I've never met him. It's a
It's
pretty
like
cool relationship.
yeah, it reminds me of like an old school pen pal or something, you know. We keep in touch. Never met in person, but yeah,
Yeah, it does
similar.
make me wonder from time to time, is he real, or is this just like virtual realities messing with me? You know, what's going on here? Am I awake? Is this a dream? What's going on?
we
But here
will
we are.
we will meet in person.
That's right. We're on the downside of COVID, which means the country's opening up, and we're making plans and hopes that we'll actually get to do some work together in person, either in Michigan or California or wherever the doors may open up. So stay tuned for that. But John's been not John certainly hasn't let any moss grow under his feet while he's during COVID. He's got always got tons of irons in the fire, and I'm fascinated to hear the work that he's doing because I resonate with it on many levels. Both of us have been students of organizational development and leadership, both formally in our education, but also professionally in our vocation. Learning a ton as we go, and as anybody will tell you, if you're going to be a learner and it's going to be relevant, then it's got to be lifelong learning. And so we're always diving into books and videos and sharing links. And hey, did you see this? And have you heard that? And wow, that's a great book. You should do that. And so we've both got lists that go way beyond our lifespan that we will get to in eternity, I suppose.
Hmm.
But John, tell us what you've been working on lately. I'm fascinated about this class that you developed where you work, and especially the delivery system, and then some of the content and some of the key outcomes that you're seeing.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot been going on actually. What's cool is I'll tell you about the this program that it's really centered on. I mean, the title of it is "Leading Without a Title," is what I've called the program, but it's really just focus on emotional intelligence and an introduction into emotional intelligence, and much more than an intro. You know, lots of tips and hints on how to improve those skills. But the cool thing is this program was modeled kind of after a class, one of my master's classes that I had, and I've used this model in many different ways. One, I just completed like a 6-month program with our church here, teaching the church leaders about emotional intelligence, and it was an awesome experience digging into scripture and tying scripture into it. It was really cool. Um, I've also used this for now, let's see, the Frankenmuth Chamber of Commerce, the Frankenmuth Morning and Noon Rotary, as well as our Frankenmuth JCs. And, you know, it's a little different each time, but it's using the same concept. So it's been really neat to replicate it. But specifically what you're talking about at the Frankenmuth Credit Union, where I'm a consultant with them as well, we have this model. It's a 6-week program, but it's not a classroom setting. So when this whole thing started, we have these competencies that you work through to get to kind of like different tiers within the organization. And one of them is to go through Dale Carnegie or a similar type class. Well, we found, not everybody in your organization is the type of person that wants Dale Carnegie or necessarily needs it for their role, because it's a pretty involved course. That's like a 14-week, like 4 hours each week, really getting you to be more comfortable in your shoes, speaking in front of people, leadership, things like that.
And you're a graduate of that program, right? Right, John? You're a graduate of that Carnegie program? Yeah.
Yeah. That was one of the, I'm telling you, you're right. 2020 kept me busy. COVID sped me up more than slowed me down. I think I did that during all online and did the Rick Olson Speaker School. Lots of cool stuff. But we realized at the organization at Franklin Credit Union that there are so many leaders. I mean, we're all leaders, right? And through leading ourselves through our lives, leaders of our families, leaders in groups. But and of course, you have supervisors, and the leadership roles within an organization. But so many of us don't have that title. But that doesn't mean we can't have a positive influence on those around us, and it doesn't mean we can't lead by example or even by influence. So I really wanted to dig into dig into those concepts.
Love that. Yeah, in fact, you hear so much, and maybe because we're immersed in it, you hear so much about leadership these days, and I love it. A lot of the stuff is really helpful and it's really insightful. But I think there is a group of people out there, and probably a bigger group than we might even imagine, that they don't necessarily see themselves as leaders because of where they landed the organization. They may not have the title. They may not even have the ambition to be a leader. They're very comfortable in the role that they have. But I love what you're saying is that leadership isn't necessarily a title in an organization. Leadership is how you show up, right? How do you respond to your own inner impulses, for better or for worse? How do you show up in relationships? So leadership, when you apply it to relationships, then it really does apply to everybody. And I love that that's what you're getting at. You're getting something much more universal than, how to do business leadership.
100%. And that's, and that's when you talk about emotional intelligence, all of the authors and the scientists, they normally break it into 4 categories, and it's, self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and then relationship management, just like you said. And we all have relationships. And, this is funny because I believe what I'm about to say to the core, and it's how I start pretty much all of my keynote speeches or my consulting sessions is I truly believe we're all leaders. And with that comes a responsibility. And the reason it is such an important responsibility is because we impact everybody we interact with. So when we talk about relationships, sure, it could be a friendship, it could be with your spouse, it could be with a loved one, family, it could be with your supervisor or your employees, but it could be, a 2-minute conversation you have with a customer that walks into your store and you never talk to them again, but you still have an impact on that person. And you don't need to be in the same room. You don't need to be in the same store these days, because you could impact someone on another continent especially since the whole world has gone digital since COVID. So it is fascinating to me. It's one of the reasons why I went through the master's program focused on leadership, is because we have such the ability to impact people, and then we have the responsibility to do that positively or negatively. And we should take that seriously and really think about it. Like every person you cross throughout a day, are you making their lives a little better, making their days a little bit better, or making it a little bit worse, or having no impact at all? And I believe when you start thinking of yourself in that way, I think it allows you to become more intentional about what you do. And then if that is your goal, to be intentional about what you do, I think you need to really grasp the concepts of emotional intelligence to get there.
I love that. Yeah, and in fact, it may be limiting to call this leadership development, because really it's human development at the very core. It's like you said, if the competencies are self-awareness and tell me the 4 again: self-awareness,
self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, being aware of others' feelings and emotions, and then the relationship management.
Yeah, so you don't even have to put leadership in any of those 4 things. Like you said, these are 4 competencies that we all want to get better at, because it it improves our lives, it improves our relationships, which really is the most important thing in our lives anyway. Our title may be very important on some levels, but that's not the most important thing. You know, people don't put on their tombstone, "Hey, I accomplished this because I rose to this level of the organization." No, they say he was a great father, he was a great person, you know, he loved well, or whatever. Those are the kind of things that really matter in the end. So I love that what you're working on is something that translates, yes, into the workplace and makes the workplace relationships much stronger. It makes individuals stronger, but then they can take those exact same competencies as they become more self-aware and more competent in their relationships wherever they go, into the grocery store, you know, into the classroom, into their families, whatever. So really you're talking about human development at the core. Emotional intelligence is a human development aspect.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you, and I'll get into explaining the model of the course here in a bit, but the skipping to the end, to the outcome of speaking to some of these individuals who do not have supervisory roles. I mean, it's amazing how many people haven't fully thought through a lot of these concepts. And they're like, my gosh, John, you've improved my relationship with my spouse. You've made me a better baseball coach, is one of the comments I got. You've helped me be more patient with my children. And so that's the thing. It's like for some reason, I feel like there's this like leadership, the title of leadership or whatever I'm trying to say has been put up on a pedestal, and it's all like, oh, there's leaders and you're either born with it or you're not, or you're a leader or you're not. Like, no, like it or not, we're all leading, like I said, ourselves, like you said, you know, everything. So this is not just organizational stuff. Now, what's really cool is one of my first master's courses was in emotional intelligence. I think that was the name of the course. I think it was emotional intelligence and whatever number designation it was.
Right.
And there were 2 books that they had us go through. Yeah, they were. It was Emotional Intelligence 2.0 by Travis Bradbury and Gene Greaves, and then there's another book called Primal Leadership. Learning to lead with emotional intelligence, and that was by Daniel Goleman. Daniel Goleman is the guy who back in the 90s really popularized the science and the concepts of emotional intelligence. The concepts have been around for centuries, if not millennia, but the actual digging into the science, that this is not just a bunch of kind of like, you know, feel good here, try this and you'll be happier. It's there's actually a science behind this that he popularized. And the cool thing about that second book I'm talking about, this Primal Leadership, it's not one of those like easy reads, or not even necessarily a fun read, because it really digs into the deep stuff. But what I love about it is it takes the emotional intelligence aspects that we've been talking about so far, the leading without a title, your leadership in every area of your life. It then goes into, well, here are 18 competencies specifically for leaders. So it breaks down each of those domains: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship management, breaks it down into leadership competencies and how to be more successful in the workplace as a leader, be more influential as a leader. And you know, what's cool about that? Well, what's cool about the book, he actually then takes it even a step further and talks about organizational emotional intelligence. So then as you know, your department at your organization, or even your organization itself, are you aware of who you are as an organization? Are you aware of who you are as a department? Are you managing that well? Do you understand how other departments are and how they need you, how they interact? And are you managing the relationships between departments or between organizations effectively? So it's a really cool like building block of, you start here, then go here, then go here. And it's I mean, that, you know, it could take you 30 years to learn all that stuff if you're really digging deep. So it's a never-ending learning process. I love it.
I love what you said, that these principles have been around for eons. So if you look into great wisdom literature from anywhere in the world in history, you'll see these principles are there. They just were called something different, and they came from a different perspective, right? And so for then someone to coin the term emotional intelligence, that's not a brand new idea. That's just a new way of packaging a very tried and true idea. And it brings back to the surface. So I love the fact you keep touching on the word awareness. To me, this is a word that I'm more aware of than I've ever been, because awareness is where all this has to begin. Because like you said, if someone's going through your course and they're like, I never thought of this before, I never saw it that way before, that's awareness, right? You become aware of what you didn't even know. As the phrase phrase goes around a lot. I don't know what I don't know. So awareness brings into your conscious view those things that you don't know, and then you know them. Then you know them. But then the other side of that same coin is, with great power comes great responsibility. To quote Spider-Man. And so awareness helps us develop and grow and become the best versions of ourselves, both in intimate relationships and in business relationships. But once you become aware of those things, well, now you've got choices to make, right? Because you can't say any longer, well, I had no idea. I was ignorant of the fact that blah, blah, blah. Now, by bringing it to your awareness, now you've got the responsibility to do something, to make good choices, to show up, right, in a way that is emotionally competent for the relationships that you're in.
Absolutely. And it's funny, that comment, you don't know what you don't know. So this book I was talking about, the Emotional Intelligence 2.0, Travis Bradbury and Gene Greaves, it comes with this little link, or it comes with a password. You can go to a website, and before you read the book, you're supposed to take this self-assessment on your own emotional intelligence. What's funny is I took that, and I scored myself pretty well the first time. I've never really dug into emotional intelligence, and never really fully thought through a lot of these concepts. And I read the book, went through the class. About 4 months later, I took the assessment again. I scored myself much lower that second time, which is funny because the point of it is you're supposed to see yourself grow and use these tactics and score better. I was like, no, I thought I was good. I read through it. I'm like, man, do I have some work to do, and scored much worse the second time.
Right. And this really goes to a mindset and a mentality too, that sometimes awareness, at first, it does make you realize that you've just said that, wow, I didn't realize how much work I have to do. So that can be overwhelming. That could be even depressing if you look at it too hard. Like, I can't believe I've been so emotionally unintelligent for so long, right? But really, then you got to get out of that first slap in the face, and you say, okay, now I know how to get from where I am, which I wasn't completely aware of, to where I could be a much better version of myself, a much better husband, father, co-worker, leader, whatever that, all of those relationships, not any of them, but all of those relationships, if you're willing to take the work. So as we've said before in our previous discussions, that information without implementation is delusion. So we can talk and read and share great concepts all we want, but if we don't take the responsibility of, now that I am aware, now I do know something that I didn't know, what am I going to do with that? That's really the question. How do I get from where I was to where now I see is a better place to be?
100%, 100%. And that is, I'm glad you mentioned that it can be intimidating, maybe almost overwhelming, because, to become the best version of ourselves, like, wow, that sounds tiring, right? Like, I'd rather just kind of
Right.
float through my life here and yeah, right. Like, I'm just going to be this version of myself. And I think it's important that we do work on this stuff. And, it's interesting. It ties into a book that Rick Olson just referred us to. He's considering using it, that Atomic Habits, I think it's called Atomic Habits.
Yes, Atomic
And
Habits. Right.
yeah, and I'm about halfway through it. And I've read a couple books on habits before. It's pretty fascinating stuff. But they talk about that a lot. Like, we need to quit focusing on this end game, this end goal of focusing on, I want to be here and accomplish this. Let's just make small changes here or there. And then eventually it'll work. You'll continue doing these things. Don't overwhelm yourself. Just do your best. Try a little thing here or there. Try these little self-improvements. And then you can eventually bring that to reality. And that's why it's a bummer. Someone signed up for my course, and just wouldn't get it started. She signed up, wouldn't get it started. And I said, what's going on? She said, I'm getting old. I'm thinking about retiring. I don't need to go through this right now. And I was like, man, I broke this course up into these like smallest little bite-sized pieces. Like, I use the book, the Emotional Intelligence 2.0, as a supplement, but I don't have them read the whole thing. It's just, hey, this week you got 10 to 15 minutes worth of reading. I mean, it's only 10 to 15 minutes worth of reading each week. And then there's a YouTube video that, one that I do of myself kind of teaching the course, because the way this course works, it kind of can go on its own. It's not a class setting. It's not, I have to be there holding your hand every step of the way. I've recorded the lessons. So there's a YouTube clip, then there's reading, and then I have them watch a TED Talk. I had no intentions of it being a TED Talk. I was just looking for video clips of like the best content for the concept for that week. And it just happened to all be TED Talks. And so it's too bad because we get overwhelmed. We get thinking like, oh, I don't have time in my life for this. And I think we need to reframe that thinking. It's not that we don't have time in our lives. This is our lives. We should at least try to become, maybe let's use the word, a better version of ourselves, so it's not so overwhelming. Take it into small bite-sized chunks, work on it. I mean, geez, 5 minutes a day, read something, listen to something, and you will evolve into it. It's and the thing about leadership and the thing about intentional living and becoming the better or best version of yourself is, yeah, it's not like I'm going to take this 6-week course and I'm going to be there. It's just the building blocks, and you're never going to be there. I mean, it's just always kind of trying to grow, trying to learn, trying to be more of a positive influence on the world.
That's fantastic. One of the things that comes to mind as you're talking is there's two mindsets. There's a growth mindset, and then there's the scarcity mindset or static, and there's lots of different ways to call it. But the principle behind it is, if you look around at nature, the truth is if it's not growing, it's dying. There isn't really any place in nature where things are just staying the same. Change is inevitable, change is all around us, and it's within us as well. But if we're not moving towards a preferred goal, a preferred future, and again, with small, sustainable steps, that's how any long-term change is sustained. It's not through going from A to Z without skipping all the steps in between. It's these small, simple, sustainable steps that are consistent over time. That's where big change happens. But if we're not moving towards growth, right? If we're not growth, no matter how incremental that may be, then nature would say, well, then we're going the opposite direction. Or as I heard someone say, get busy living or get busy dying. There is no in between, right? And so when you talked about the lady who's like, I'm getting close to retirement, I don't really need to go through this. There is this resignation, right, inside of her. And I've heard this in other people who are even younger. Like, I don't really need to, I'm happy where I am. I don't really need to grow. I don't need to change. I don't look to be promoted. I'm in my sweet spot here. But again, that's taking out the awareness that if you're not growing, then you're dying. And with change happening all around us, it's very easy that we get left behind in the most important areas of our life, which are relationships, if we're not constantly improving.
Absolutely. And we keep circling back to relationships, which makes sense because we're talking about emotional intelligence, but that's the spice of life, right? Or I don't even know if that's the word I wanted to use, but it really doesn't matter if you are religious or, well, again, there's a lot of iffy words that I'm using here, but it doesn't matter what necessarily you believe in, because whether you are religious, in the Christianity world, community is such an important thing. These relationships are an important thing. And then, or if you don't believe in that and you're just a person of pure science and don't believe anything else, there's tons of science talking about having these impactful relationships and having a purpose-driven life, but having strong relationships with people leads to longevity of life. Maybe you don't even care about longevity of life, but it leads to higher quality of life. So it's easy, like you said, to almost recluse. And I'm going to be honest with you. I was there. I've had a interesting life journey, to say the least, just within my own head, pretty much. And there was a point in time, when I was growing up, I feel like I just always had to have tons of friends. And I don't even know, looking back, it was almost like tons of acquaintances, because I never really dug into deep friendships with anybody. And I was just the guy that I knew tons of people. And then at this point in my life, in my probably mid to late 20s, where I was just like, what do you do? That's not important. And I actually started reclusing and just kind of like focusing on maybe myself, maybe learning some things like that. And what's funny is all the learning and the classes I've taken and the intentional approach I've gone about my own life made me realize that those relationships are important. So now I'm like circling back and trying to redevelop strong bonds, like you and me, honestly. Like we're connecting on a deeper level than just we know each other and we both know Rick and we're both on a similar career path. It's no, let's really like dig into each other and find a connection. And as you and I've seen, Joe, we I believe we make each other better through our relationship. We come up with ideas talking together that we never would have had on our own.
Absolutely, yeah. The power of dialogue, it's fascinating to me. We've talked about this before. We'll be talking about two concepts, and then a third concept shows up. And you see this too in wisdom literature throughout the ages too, that in a dialogue, there's the third eye, is what some people would say, where you see something from an angle that neither one of you would see alone. I think that's pretty important in terms of relationship. Another thing that came to mind as you were just talking is, there are seasons we all go through, seasons of life, and you can talk about it in whatever metaphor you want. But there are times when I have felt super hyper engaged and focused and driven, and I'm just going to go tackle everything and all at the same time, and I'm going to change the world. And then there are times when I am just depleted and not motivated, and I just don't want to talk to anybody or do anything. And I'm just very, very fine to be left alone, right? And people don't ever see that side of me very often, except for perhaps my wife and my family, who see me 24/7. But all that to say, I think I think there's this temptation for all of us to say, well, I'm not that kind of person, right? I'm not driven, or I'm not cut from that cloth, or I don't have those gifts or talents or abilities, or I don't have that opportunity, or I don't have that much time. All these excuses where we let ourselves off the hook and say, I'm not going to grow. And perhaps if that means I'm dying, so be it. But I would say sometimes that's just a matter of lack of energy, or it could be depression, or it could be all these different things because of life circumstances. But I would say don't give up on yourself, right? So give yourself time to know that the ebb and flow of life, the seasons of life, there is winter when everything's dead and dormant, and you wonder, is anything ever going to come from this? And then there is spring and summer and harvest, when you see, okay, all those little small sustainable steps, and the work that I was doing, which just seemed like I was going nowhere and spinning my wheels for who knows how long, and then boom, comes up from the ground, and there's fruit and more harvest than you ever imagined. You're like, where did this come from? It became because I didn't give up in the dark times. I didn't stop in winter and say, okay, I'm done. Just bury me now. Right.
Right. And the one thing you just said that I want to dig into more is that whole concept where it's just not me. I'm not that kind of person, or whatever the case may be. And there's tons of literature out here on this. Like what I'm about to say is everywhere. But there's a misconception of are you born a leader, or can you become a leader? Or are you born that type of person that is interested in self-improvement, or are you not? And it's like we draw this line and think either that's me or that's not me, and just whatever. That is circling this back to emotional intelligence. That's the beauty of the emotional intelligence. And in a lot of my trainings and speaking, I talk about the concept of the X factor. There was, when I was first coming into I believe the concept's been around for quite a while, but when I was first coming to the professional world, everyone was talking about this X factor, right? Like either this person's got it or this person doesn't have it, right? Natural born leader, natural born firecracker. This person's got it and these people don't. And they draw this line and they put it on this pedestal saying like, okay, well, you're either this person or you're not. That is just blatantly false. Now, I'm not going to say some people aren't more natural at it and born with certain tendencies, but they've been learning those things all along the way from examples from their family or friends or whatever. And that's the beauty of this emotional intelligence is in my opinion, it so in the terms of someone who doesn't feel like they're into self-improvement or doesn't really necessarily value relationships, it's just not who I am. You can start reading this stuff, you can start seeing the value of it, and then there's tips and hints in every book you have on how to enhance those skills. And then you take it to the leadership standpoint, and I'll go back to that the Daniel Goleman book of the 4 domains of emotional intelligence, and then broken down to several competencies of leading with emotional intelligence. You may think you're not that person. You may have more potential than your current supervisor. You may have more potential than any leader you look up to, and you just start working on these concepts one at a time, and you can evolve into that person that either you want to be or think you should be, or whatever the case may be. So I'm just really trying to hammer home the point where there's no line, and there's no you're either this person, you're that type of person. sure, there's personalities, there's lots of things, but you can work on things and become better at them, and you can evolve yourself. And does not have to be this thing where it's like, all right, I'm too busy right now, but next year I'm going to focus on it. Like, we need to get out of that mindset of having this specific goal in this specific time frame, and just start one thing at a time. Change one little thing, focus on this one little thing, and you'll get there.
Absolutely. That's really good. Yeah. Again, the growth mindset that, and I've heard it said too, the danger is to say, well, am I better than the people around me? Do I have more emotional intelligence than that person, whether it's somebody I supervise or someone who leads me? That's the wrong question, right? That's going to get you in trouble all the time. The question for growth is, am I a better person than I was yesterday? Have I made improvements over who I was yesterday? And if I did that, then I'm on the path of growth. And then tomorrow, am I a better version of the self that I was today, right? And so it is these small incremental steps, but the comparison isn't to the people around us, because as you have mentioned and said so eloquently, everybody's wired differently, and that doesn't make one better or worse. And the comparison of better for worse really should only be within. Am I becoming a better or worse version of me? And if I'm going the wrong direction, there may be lots of reasons for that, but it's not too late, right? It's not where I resign myself to, that's it, I'm done, I'm toast, I don't have what it takes, I'll never be identified as a leader, I'll never grow, I'll never learn. But hey, I'm going to become a better version of who I am. And I see that there's room for growth, there's room for improvement. And emotional intelligence is one of the great tools to help us learn, one, to become aware of where my limitations are, but then to take steps to increase my capabilities.
Absolutely. And you just made me think of, I don't know if it's a metaphor, but it's something I thought through years and years ago. And I think it can be applied to everything you just said, and it can be applied to the workplace and everything else. And I think about it in terms of sports. I used to be like super competitive, like almost to the point of being a hothead. And I would be so angry if I lost at something and so happy if I won at something. And it became apparent to me at one point, at a fairly young age, actually, that pretty much what you just said, it's not important. Like, what if you had a really bad game, right? Like, you just did not perform well. Let's say we're talking about basketball. You just did not perform well, but your team still won. Or maybe your whole team didn't perform well, but you still won. Are you really that pleased with yourself? Does that mean like, oh, we won, we don't need to practice anymore because we won, right? And that is not the definition of success, in my opinion. It is, am I becoming a better player? Am I becoming a more valuable asset to the team I'm involved in? Whether you feel like you're winning, you feel like you're losing, whether you got that promotion, whether you didn't get that promotion, what I changed my filter. I changed my filter to say, okay, I'm going to be competitive against myself, and I'm going to push myself to become better. And even if I lose a game, but I performed really well, I'm going to be proud of myself. And even if I win a game, if I didn't perform very well, I'm going to have some things to work on. And so it's funny. I've never really thought about using this concept in the business world or in our personal development, but I reframed my focus to think the competition is against myself. Involving others is just for fun. Having someone to play against, or having let's say you're going against somebody for a promotion at work, whatever the case may be. All you can do is to be the best version of yourself, and whether you get that promotion or you don't, it's just a reflection on, you still need to work on things to improve them. So let the competition with other teams, other people, let that just be almost kind of like a fun, engaging thing, but really be competitive against yourself and your own self improvement.
I love that. I got a helicopter going over. For those of you who are just tuning into audio only, I think the cops finally found me. I've got to run and hide. I'll be back in just a few minutes. Hi, I'm over here. Uh,
See a SWAT
wow.
team rappelling down.
Yeah, exactly. SWAT. That takes me back way before you were born to a TV show called SWAT. It's very funny. Anyway, that's a side trail. Uh, but to use that sports metaphor in a different way, and this came to mind as you're talking. For many years after I got out of my competitive sports years, I played softball on local teams. Some people call them beer leagues. Some people call them church leagues. I've been even in church leagues that were beer leagues, but I played lots of softball. Before I got married, especially, I'd play 2 or 3 times a week. And one of my teams, they would set the lineup for the batting order based on your batting average to date of the season. So the person with the best batting average so far in the season would be number 1, and then they work their way down to the person with the worst batting average. So there's pros and cons to this concept. One is that immediately where you rank in terms of batting average by where you end up in the lineup. And so, there's always this internal competition like you were talking about. I want to improve so I can move further up in the lineup. But however, the downside was I found myself at times wishing that one of my teammates who was higher up in the lineup would have a bad game so I could move up into the lineup. And I got totally just slapped myself upside the head sometimes. I go home like, really, Joe, you want your own teammate to not have a good game so you can move up in the lineup? Well, how is that helping your team, right? What kind of mindset is that? And I realized this goes right back to that same concept that it's not a competition against the people around us. And we do, in fact, what we really want is everybody to succeed. And I've even heard some that's called a zero-sum mindset, that there's only enough growth to go around. There's only enough abundance to go around, so that if there's a limited amount, if there's only so much, then if you win, I lose, right? That's the mindset. If you succeed, then I'm not. So I want to succeed even at your expense. But the different side of that, the way of looking at it, is that there's unlimited ability to succeed and grow. And in fact, when you succeed, we succeed. So that's when I turned my mind around and said, hey, if everybody on my team has a better batting average than me, that means we still have a good chance of winning, and we're going to have a lot of fun. And then I've got this goal, right, to continue to grow and get better. And I want to move my way up, but I want to move my way up against the best possible competition. That's when you hear these elite athletes say, hey, yeah, I don't want the people on the other team to get injured. I don't want to see Giannis Antetokounmpo go down with a knee injury, even if I'm playing against him for the championship, because I only win if I compete against the best possible competition. Sometimes that's myself, and sometimes that's those around us. But it's when we realize there's enough growth, there's enough abundance, there's enough emotional intelligence that we all need to learn, that when you win, we win. And that's a whole nother way of looking at it.
100%. Way to dig into the details of what I was trying to say. Thank you. I just discovered yet another thing we have in common. There was also a period of my life where I was playing softball 2 to 3 times a week on 3 different leagues, and it's a lot of fun. But I think that's what has now attracted me so much to the ever frustrating yet ever self-development game of golf, because it's a very obvious game that shows you if you're improving or if you're getting worse. But anyways, that's neither here nor there. So I wanted to circle back and talk to you some more about the course that I've got going. And just one thing I wanted to highlight that I think this came to mind. Because a young man that went through my course who put in tons of effort. It was I believe he's the most rewarding student I've ever had. That really made me feel like I was making an impact. And he's a baseball coach. He's a high school baseball coach, I think is what made me think about him. And he's used a lot of these concepts in his coaching. And one thing that he did, so there's a story that I tell within this course. And I think I've told the story numerous times. I don't know if I've told it here yet, and I won't go into it all right now. But the outcome of the story is the concept that my grandfather introduced to me. And it's really just a mindset. And it's something he said once: are you willing to put your name on that? In regards to a project we were working on, are you willing to put your name on it? And it really is a way to kind of reframe, are you willing to sign off on that work project you did? Or I like to think about it in terms of, are you willing to sign off on that day you just had, or week or month or year, whatever the case may be. And when you're thinking about, are you willing to put your name on it? Literally, are you going to sign that in front of the people that you want to make most proud, right? Are you willing to sign off on that in front of your spouse, in front of your loved ones, your parents, your children, whoever you most want to be respected by. Everything that we do, if you think I'm willing to put my name on that, it's amazing how many times I think through how many times I'm not willing to put my name on it. You have to kind of go back and maybe redo it or refocus yourself. But what was really cool about this course I went through is I tell this story, I told it and everything. I give so much information. I have people reading books and do all this stuff and all these amazing little factoids that I want everyone to remember. And the one thing they keep telling me about is, man, that story about the grandpa really rang home, and I'm not willing to put my name on it. And so I'm doing this wrap-up session with this young guy who, again, said that to me, and I was like, that's awesome. And he goes, check this out. And he turns around. We were doing a Zoom call. He turns around and pulls a calendar off the wall and puts it up to the camera and says, check this out. And I look at it, and I just see a bunch of like squigglies all over the place. I don't know what he's showing me. I was like, what is that? He goes, this is my calendar, and this is me signing off on every single day that I've gone through. And he put his signature on every single day, and he's like, that's his new purpose. Because one of the things with emotional intelligence is, you got all these ways to become more self-aware and manage yourself, and to become better at picking up on cues of others and be better at managing relationships. But if you don't have some true north, a moral compass, some sort of purpose you're working towards, it's almost like all those concepts are all for naught, right? You need to have a something to be working towards. So he's working towards, am I willing to put my name on it? He's signing his calendar every single day. I was like, man, you just filled my heart. That's the coolest thing. I'm actually having an impact on people. That's fantastic.
Well, I love that because it grounds concepts into a daily practice. Again, this is the implementation piece where you take really great information and you do the implementation piece, and that's where you get results. So it's no longer a delusion, it's actually making progress. And just that simple practice, if nobody hears anything else from our podcast today, a simple podcast of evaluating from an individual project to a long-term thing that you're working on, or even at the very end of your day to look back and reflect over your day and say, am I proud of who I was, of how I showed up in all these different areas of my life? If so, I'm going to sign my name, and I'm going to be honest enough to not sign my name if I wasn't so proud, so that at least I can look back at my calendar and say, well, there's a day that gave me a reason to improve, a reason to show up better the next day, so that I can sign my name and be proud of it. But man, if you can bring that, even that question to the forefront of your mind, to your awareness, to go back to what we talked about at the very beginning, in every situation, in every meeting, in every project, in every relationship, am I going to be proud of the person that showed up today, and am I going to be able to sign my name at the very end? I think that's going to change the way you show up in all these different places. I even had a pastor friend of mine who, at the very end of every day, he would go and have prayers with his son, and they would ask each other this question: hey, are you proud of the person that you were today? And then the father would ask the son, and then he would make sure the son asked the same thing back to you. Hey, Dad, are you proud of the person that you were today? And it went on and on. It was very good and an excellent question for them to ask each other. And then there was one day when the dad was in the middle of this supercharged situation where he had to make a really difficult decision. The easy decision, nobody would have known whether or not he was being integrous to how he felt. Everybody would have just moved on. But deep down in his heart, he knew that tonight I have to stand next to my son, and he's going to ask me, Dad, are you proud of the person who you were today? And if I make this decision, I'm going to have to say no. I don't want to do that. And so then he made the hard decision, and everybody in the room's like, what are you doing? Why would you do that? It's almost like career suicide. He's like, I'm not going to tell my son that I wasn't proud of the person that showed up today in this situation. And it has changed his career path dramatically. But he would tell you even today, and I heard him saying this after the fact, that I wouldn't change a thing. And I'm so glad that I knew that at the end of the day, my son's going to ask me, Dad, are you proud of the person that you were today? And he said, yeah, it wasn't the most expedient thing. It wasn't the most profitable. I could have got away with it, right? But there's no way that I would have sacrificed my integrity for, convenience. And I'm not going to do that because I know my son's going to ask me.
That's fantastic. That's exactly what I'm talking about there. We're tapping into a subject that could be maybe a whole nother book in itself.
And I got the parrots going by.
Wow, that was loud.
Yeah. It's parrot season.
Yes. Yeah. Be very, very quiet.
That's right.
No, that that I think
Apparently,
like
the parents want to tell us their opinion on this whole thing.
I'd like to hear it. Yeah. No, the concept that we're digging into is awesome, and it's a way to like, I keep using the word reframe, but it's a way to reframe your thinking. And what's interesting about it, to me, it almost has made me reconsider prioritization. So, for example, let's just say I'm mowing my lawn and I get the lawn mowed. It looks fine. I definitely should do some weed whacking, right? But I know the weed whacking takes about this amount of time. And, the whole concept of every time you say yes to one thing, you're saying no to something else, right? How are we spending our time? And so what's interesting is I found myself, and as I'm speaking this out loud, I'm wondering how it's going to sound, but I've found myself saying, you know what? I am okay with not weed whacking this one time because I know that half hour that it's going to take. I actually want to spend that time with my daughter before she goes to sleep, or maybe I want to spend that time, doing a podcast with Joe, or trying to write this book that I'm starting to get into, and to have a more positive, maybe for my side business, or even to log into work and get something done that I had to get done. So it's one of those things where I have found myself still willing to put my name on a day, even if a certain project I didn't completely go through to completion, but I took the time, I analyzed it, and I said, you know what, I'm okay with not doing this one thing because this other thing is more important to me right now. And I think that's a slippery slope. You have to be very careful to not use it as an excuse for procrastination, or use an excuse to do something you want to do, not something you need to do. But it's a filter to think through.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, another way too to look at that is the word grace, because there are times when, with all great intention, you don't get to a project, you don't finish something, or you don't do it the way that you wish you had. You didn't show up the way you wish you had. You get to the end of the day, and you're not really willing to sign your name to it, or you couldn't answer your son's question, "Did you show up, Dad, today?" in a way that you're proud of, and you got that reservation inside, right? So again, that's a point of decision. Am I going to wallow in self-pity? Am I going to be bummed? Am I going to give up? Am I going to quit? Am I going to I'm not going to do this anymore because this sucks, right? Or am I going to give myself some grace and say, okay, today didn't go so great. That project isn't what I wanted. I made some choices there that I wish I had done differently. Okay, I'm learning. Now I'm aware of that, right? And I'm going to make new decisions. You give myself some grace, and in that grace, move on, move ahead. Don't get stuck in being stuck, right? But say, okay, what do I do differently tomorrow so that I don't have this same feeling at the end of the day when I get to the end of the day tomorrow? Give yourself grace, and grace to others as well, of course.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it make this whole thing, when I started teaching these classes, and really telling the story about how you're willing to put your name on it. It's a story that's been on my mind for a long time. I didn't start telling it. I mean, this happened when I was in my late teens. So probably 20 years ago is when the concept my grandpa introduced to me. What's funny is I told him about a week or so ago, I was like, Grandpa, I don't know if you know this or not, but I'm telling stories about you, and it's really impacting some people. And I told him the story. He's like, I don't even remember that. I was like,
I
man,
love it.
like, you don't even realize what impact that's had on me. But anyways,
Right.
what was I getting into? Oh, right when I started telling the story, I had just actually stepped down off of a volunteer board position at a farmer's market, and I'll be honest, I quite abruptly stepped down from this position, and I'm thinking to myself, like, man, am I willing to put my name on what I did there? And I'll be honest with you, I'm still kind of torn on it. I'm like, I do believe it was the right move for me. It was something that I should have done. Maybe I did it a little bit too abruptly. That was fair for the others around me, but there was some emotion involved, speaking of emotional intelligence. So it just made sense at the time. And I think what's important, and you were just touching on it as well, is maybe I'm not willing to put my name on exactly how that all rolled out, but I'm certainly trying to learn from that experience and trying to make sure, that I don't run into a questionable scenario again where I'm wondering if I'm willing to put my name on it. And I mean, it's a never ending thing. It's a never ending filter. And, there's no such thing, in my opinion, there's no such thing as a perfect person. There's no such thing as perfection in general. And we're talking about leadership or self-improvement. And we're going to stumble along the way, and we're going to have, ebbs and flows and peaks and valleys. And I think it's just so important to keep your eye on that prize and to have that true north, to have that moral compass, to have that filter. Are you proud of your day to day? Are you willing to put your name on your day to day? And the answer isn't going to be yes 100% of the time. And for goodness sakes, many people that know me know that I am not willing to, I'm not proud of many things I've done in my life. And that's actually been a motivation for me to get into what I'm getting into. When I started understanding the responsibility of leadership, and when I started realizing that I found myself in these positions of leadership or positions of influence, even just in one-on-one relationships, where people maybe ask me for advice or would look up to me in a certain way, I never really considered the power and the impact of it. And then looking back through my life, I'm like, man, there are many things I have done that have probably led people. I'm not going to say it's led them astray, and I don't think I ruined anyone's life, but maybe I made some things seem okay that really aren't okay. And what I'm getting at is it made me realize that there are certain strengths that we all have, and we should be using those strengths to the best of our abilities. And that's really what has brought me to having these conversations with you, and both of us becoming consultants with Rick Olson seminars and all that stuff. Is I want to look back at everything I've done, look back at the consider the strengths I've had and the influence I've had on people, and just make sure that moving forward to the best of my ability, every impact I have on everyone is positive. And it's so hard. I mean, this emotional intelligence stuff is so hard. Like, I can just think, I was just thinking a couple of days ago, like, man, why did I say that to that person? That just that didn't make anything better. That didn't improve their day or improve their life. That was just, you don't need to say those things. And it's just a constant filter to think through, not beat yourself up over, but learn from it and try to do better the next time.
Yeah. Back to that concept of grace again. We're running out of time in this podcast. We've got lots more to cover. So for those of you that have tuned in thus far, this is an ongoing discussion, and we'll keep this going. But what I do want to touch on before we close today is that we talked a lot about strengths and about maximizing your strengths and growing in your strengths. We haven't talked about so much about weaknesses, but I'm hearing and seeing and reading, and I think you're probably picking up on this as well in your literature, that what's important too is not to either ignore or deny or even minimize your weaknesses, because in relationships, it's in the vulnerable places, it's in our weaknesses, in our failures, where we can connect, where we say, oh man, I feel you, I understand that, man, I went through that too, and boy, I can really relate, and I can relate to you oftentimes as a friend, as a leader, on the points of weakness and failure as quicker and better than I can on you having all the answers and being the perfect leader, which all of us know that isn't even true. But this goes to the Brene Brown talks, TED Talks, to talk about TED Talks about vulnerability, that part of being integrous and showing up and emotional intelligence, right, is also the admission of my weaknesses, being vulnerable, saying, I'm stuck, I don't get it, I failed, whatever. And it's actually in those admissions, those being integrous to who you really are in the moment, whether it was awesome or terrible, where people connect with you and the relationships grow, sometimes stronger in those points of vulnerability, or she would say oftentimes in those points of vulnerability, and I'm tending to see that as well, than having it all together and being the guru and being the answer guy and saying, yeah, I can sign my name off today because I did everything perfectly all day long. People are like, well, you're in a whole nother plane and I can't relate to you, right? Yeah. Are you seeing that as well?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, 100%. I always have to think through that. You also made me think about there's a British gentleman, I believe his name is Marcus Buckingham, who I think he wrote the Strengths Finder book. I may be mixing a couple things off there, but I saw him present something once, and it talks about all this stuff that you're talking about, strengths, weaknesses. And it is, being cognizant of your weaknesses is so important. And then being able to put them through a filter of, first of all, A, I accept the fact that I'm weak in this area. B, it's how big of a weakness is this? Is this having a negative impact on my life or on other people? And if it is having a negative impact, I think he even used the term "stop the bleeding." If this is a weakness that is making you bleed out because you are just draining yourself or not, or draining others, you need to focus on that weakness and have the humility to be able to work on it. But being cognizant of it, at least you can keep it in check. But what he does circle around, and the whole strengths finder is, be aware of your weaknesses, keep them in check, realize which ones have to be worked on and which ones maybe you can just accept the fact that it's not a strength of yours, but then really focus on your strengths and really hone them in, you're more likely to improve on something you're strong at, to get that from good to great, because taking a weakness to great is a long journey. So it's being cognizant, being humble, being aware of your shortcomings, and getting them into a place where you're comfortable, and then focus on those strengths to bring your strengths to even a higher level of greatness.
Yeah. All these great concepts. I know that some people kind of push back or discount themselves, like, well, that's all nice and great for other people, but I don't see anything really of value for me. What's in it for me? That's really the question we're all motivated by. Does this either bring me more pleasure or does it reduce my pain? And I think we can say very honestly that emotional intelligence which starts with self-awareness and then moving that into your relationships, there is great benefit to yourself and to all of those around you. It actually can increase significantly the quality of your life. And it may or may not translate into a promotion or a paycheck, but it very likely could. But at the very least, you will come to the end of your day and be able to sign your name and say, you know what, I recognized my strengths and I maximized those, and I recognized my weakness and I minimized those, and I was honest and I was vulnerable, and I showed up as an authentic human being in my relationships. Yeah, I can be proud of that. And do I have room to grow? I absolutely do. And I'm gonna grow, and I'm gonna maximize my strengths, minimize my weaknesses. And sometimes that's a self-assessment, and as we talked about, self-awareness. And sometimes that does require relationship. It requires a dialogue with someone who you know and you trust, and who loves you, who wants you to succeed. You can say, hey, I think this might be a blind spot, but did you know that when you said those things, it came across this way? I'm not even sure that's what you intended, but it came across because of the tone or because of the abruptness or whatever that might be. And we all have our blind spots. So this is part of being vulnerable. But if you're willing to grow and you really want to become a better version of yourself day by day, and you realize that that is going to benefit you, it's going to benefit your family, it's going to benefit your team, it's going to benefit your organization, ultimately it'll benefit your community and your world if you keep showing up as a better version of yourself. Sometimes you do need someone who, with the loving, what do they say, the faithful are the wounds of a friend, who can say the things that hurt. They hurt in the moment, but that short-term pain creates long-term gain where you increase your awareness, what you never could have done on your own, but you do that with the input of someone who can really help you grow at a faster pace, accelerate your growth.
Yeah, absolutely. And you made me, I think that's a good point to almost end the session on here, is what really are we talking about here? Succeeding, what's in it for me? My personal opinion is there's no better goal in life than a peace of mind. To have true, I almost want to say the word content, even though that doesn't seem like it's ambitious enough, but to be truly content and have a level of joy and peace within yourself. You don't need to be a supervisor. You don't need to get that promotion. You don't need to be able to be, whatever your definition of, I guess, of success is, I suppose matters, but to be content within yourself, know who you are, be aware of your weaknesses, be humble, be willing to accept that feedback that you're just talking about. And so that, we're really consciously going towards being happy. And I don't mean, and I think these words get quite used interchangeably. I'm not talking about short-term gratification. We're talking about a true sense of value and worth and happiness. And I think if you think through everything we just said over this past hour, and be honest with yourself and be true with yourself, you can find that. And I don't think there's anything better I don't think there's a better goal to shoot for.
Absolutely, yeah. And you can talk to most people towards the end of their life. Really, what they were looking for was a sense of purpose, right? And then a sense of fulfillment or contentment, like you're talking about. Not contentment to say, I'm not going to grow, I'm not going to change, but that I really did maximize my opportunities, and I showed up authentically, and I did continue to grow into the best or better version of myself day by day. So we have filled up an hour rather quickly. It's amazing how fast the time goes. But I want to thank my friend John for tuning in here and for sharing the wisdom of his experience and what's going on in his life. And to say, everybody out there, we are not the answer guys. We are the answer seekers, right? We're students of life, and we are learning and growing every day. And I'm sure that we'll look back at this podcast a year from now going, oh, if only we had known, right? All the things that we learned between now and then. And so I just want to encourage all of our listeners to go, be intentional about your path of growth for yourself and for all the relationships that you're in. Grow in emotional intelligence, start with awareness, and then implement the great principles that you learn along the way, and see if you won't look back and say, you know what, I'm really happy with where I've come, but I'm not arrived. I'm going to keep growing. So for John Wyrow, Joe McCarthy here at MoJOE Studios, thanks for tuning in, and tune in next time as we continue our discussion about emotional intelligence and whatever else might come up along the way. Good to see you, John. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.